everybody and welcome to round number 2 of the Altibox Norway chess tournament. I'm Gustafsson. I'm being joined by the man who overtook 2 of the players yesterday in the rating list by sitting here giving witty comments. Super Grandmaster Peter Svidler.
Hello,
what can we look forward to today?
Always looking forward to live chess. I'm a live chess junkie, have been for years. Commentating on it makes it even better.
Does it?
I think it does actually, yeah. It makes you feel involved a little bit more, and you get to exercise your observational powers a little bit.
Let's not use fancy words just now. Let's look at the pairings. We have Grandmaster Grandelius, the underdog from Sweden, rated 2-6-49, facing Levon Aronian. Not an underdog, even though he might still be dealing with the pain of the candidates tournament. Who knows who you got? Niels White, but outrated quite a bit, as always.
You're putting me on the spot immediately. Yeah, well, half a minute in and I have to do predictions. One day I will punish you by predicting 5 draws, or maybe I will just start doing it from this round.
Right now?
Yeah, no, I think I think a draw is probable here. Well, probable is maybe strong, but yeah, I'll go with a draw in this game.
I'll be a contrarian. I'll go, not really a contrarian, I'll go with the rating favorite Levon Aronian. I believe all the players have circled the Niels game on their calendar until shown otherwise. For an outsider, it's very important to start well in this tournament.
Yeah, that is very true. And I mean, we discussed this yesterday, and that definitely is how people will be approaching their games against Niels with any color. I mean, with White more so, I suppose, but with Black as well. But still, I mean, he's a very strong player, and he made an interesting comment yesterday that he, when trying to mentally, envisage how this tournament will go and what his problems could be here, he did not think overconfidence will be one of them. But yesterday, right out of the opening, he said he felt that okay, in this game, nothing will happen anymore, and he was shown otherwise by Vladimir Kramnik in an endgame, which did start out more or less completely equal, but soon wasn't equal anymore. So you know, some adjustments will have to be made, perhaps. But I like Niels as a chess player a lot. I think he's a very, very interesting young player, and I wish him well. Let's put it like this.
All right. I wish him well too. I just think he's going to lose. Li Chao against Kramnik.
Yeah, this will be. I'm not sure how much they played against each other. Probably not a lot. There was one game, yeah, in the world teams, and well, Li Chao is a very, very solid player, and Vladimir's approach to chess changed in the recent years quite a bit, but I still feel that in a tournament of this magnitude, his first Black game, he will probably not go for something outlandish. And I think generally when he's playing Black, you feel he will not be in any trouble, but he probably will play something solid, which will not give him too many winning opportunities as well. So
draw.
Yeah, draw is a safe prediction there.
Anish Giri, our boy, against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Very evenly matched, these guys rating-wise and also sort of career arc-wise, even though Anish is a little younger. They've played a lot. I believe MVL even has a tiny plus score.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Should be interesting, and this is the one game not the only game today I'm looking forward to, and we apologize for if you suddenly can hear a lot of background noise. It's because we're sitting in an open hall with people coming in and discussing their life stuff 3 meters in front of us. But
we can call them names. It's Peter Heine Nielsen who's yelling as usual, disrupting the whole show. Might be on purpose. Maybe Magnus's opponent is thinking about his first move, so he's trying to.
Yeah, we don't know what his exact motivations are, and we will try and determine them as the show progresses. But yeah, he is doing that currently. Anyway, back to the game. I'm really looking forward to that because we could be maybe overstating this a little bit, but I feel that Anish will play with a lot more freedom now. Now that his drawing streak is over, he won a very nice game yesterday against Pavel Elyanov. Played well, utilized probably the one mistake Black made in that game turned out to be a decisive mistake, and his conversion was flawless. So I feel this has to be a very interesting game. Both of them are very, very booked up, so could also be a very interesting theoretical discussion. And
we might get a Najdorf, because Anish has played one e4 just as yesterday, and on the blitz looks like he likes the e pawn better than the d pawn these days.
Yeah, he seems to have switched to this after the candidates, and also in the candidates he's done this on a number of occasions. So, but he has a very, very wide opening repertoire and can play more or less anything. Knows a lot. So
that these days studying openings.
Very difficult to predict what will happen in the game. A bishop g5 Najdorf. I understand we haven't really discussed all the pairings yet, but yeah, this one has the potential of being very, very sharp and very exciting.
So draw.
Yeah.
Then we have Veselin Topalov against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. Topalov started off badly in his career against Magnus, lost a lot of games, but recently he's made a bit of a comeback, beat him back-to-back in Norway chess and Sinkfield.
Yeah.
Drew his game in London, even though he didn't do well in London. What do we like today? Whom do we like?
Well, I think that Magnus so far has shown excellent readiness for this tournament. I wouldn't call that preparation, because blitz and one game yesterday they aren't maybe enough to draw sort of long-term conclusions, but it's quite clear that he comes here extremely motivated. He said as much in a number of pre-tournament interviews, and Veselin, on the other hand, is coming off a lean run of form, let's put it like this. But with white and having played one d4, I think he will go for something solid. He will push for a little bit, and draw is the likeliest result, I think, here.
I agree with that draw. Last but not least, Pavel Elyanov and Hare Krishna, your two victims yesterday, because you passed both of them on the live rating list.
Yeah.
Whoever wins, though, might catch you again, so you're probably rooting for a draw on that one.
Frankly, it's a storyline which I chuckle along with everybody else, but it's not a huge big deal to me, to be honest. And yeah, nobody believes me, obviously. Yeah, I am famous for knowing all three of my ratings to a decimal point, but or not. What are the colors again?
Elyanov is white.
Pavel, F3 Nimzo. So Pavel is not really messing around there. F3 is maybe arguably the sharpest reply to the Nimzo. So he wants to get back on track as early as possible. Yesterday he lost a game to Anish where he felt he was doing fine, and then he made one unfortunate decision, and that was it. So a somewhat telling, I think, opening choice from him, because he also is very decently booked up, but there's a number of things he could play against the Nimzo, and F3 indicates that he wants as sharp a game as possible, as early as possible.
Yeah, normally he's more of a Catalan guy, be it knight f3, g3, or g3 immediately. I believe the reasoning is, if there's one weakness in Harry's game, is sort of lack of experience in opening battles at the highest levels. And it showed a little bit yesterday against Magnus, where he didn't know the theory. Maybe I think that's an idea for Pavel.
From what I've seen in the press conference, he actually had a pretty decent idea what he was supposed to do, but decided to dodge the main lines in order to avoid whatever Magnus and his team have prepared. So it's not as if he was completely unaware. He just made maybe a somewhat wrong choice not to engage in the main.
I'm not saying he doesn't have a clue, but he was much worse after 10 moves.
That is correct, yeah. And c5, d5 in this position, we could be in for a very, very sharp game here. I mean, there's plenty of theory. Yeah, b5 is maybe the main move, but also castles e4, e4, d6, and Harry plays b5 very fast. So it seems like maybe he expected it from somebody. Maybe not precisely Pavel, but he probably expected it from somebody. And he is reasonably confident in his opening choice. The old main line in this position goes e4, b takes c4, bishop takes c4, knight takes d5, and I think this is supposed to be close to equal, no?
I think this is supposed to be a little better for white. I thought people do something else here normally, be it castles or bishop a6 has been around. But knight takes d5 here. The point is ed queen h4 check, of course.
Yeah.
But I thought bishop takes d5 was supposed to give white a little something. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and after b5, e4, hard castle. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if this is. No, this is a different variation. The famous game between Wesley So and Levon Aronian. That was.
No, that was without b5.
Yeah, that was a different. I mean, the underlying ideas are similar, but Levon actually postponed b5 for a while, played bishop a5 at some point, I think, with the pawn still on b7 to sidestep some of the potential replies to b5. That was an interesting game and an instructive game. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's Sinfield Cup, right?
Yeah, I covered it in my recent video series with Artur Yusupov in great detail, so you can check out that game. Levon sometimes has very nice games with black fighting for the initiative. But this line, e4 castle, is also a very topical main line. Bunch of kayaking games here. e5, for example, knight to e8, f4.
Oh yeah, it's
Stuff
that
gets
position.
very, very sharp.
Yeah, this is incredibly messy and requires reasonably deep preparation, so as not to spend an hour on the next 3 moves inventing the bicycle. So we'll see what transpires. Pavel in general is very, very well booked up. Works on chess very diligently. Also worked with a number of very strong players. I mean, he, apart from his work in helping Maria Mozachuk prepare for the World Championship match, he also worked with Boris Gelfand for a number of years, and generally doesn't suffer from lack of theoretical knowledge.
No, he knows stuff. Let's see how booked up Veselin Topalov is. Magnus Carlsen chose the move knight bd7, which
this is what Vishy has been doing in the candidates. So, and queen c2 was, I think, the reply in both of Vishy's games there, right? I think both Anish and Veselin played something else, right? Trying to remember.
No, Vishy played this once, and he faced the main line with cd5, bishop g5, and then Anish came up with his move queen c2.
Yeah.
Which, sorry, not cd, bishop g5. The first game against Levon was this, and this is supposed to be slightly better for white, but people have been dabbling with b5 here and somehow surviving. I don't trust it. I had a game myself here. I think it's slightly dubious, but if guys like Vishy and Magnus start employing this, might have to revisit that.
Yeah.
Queen c2 is a sneaky little move order. White is trying to lure black back into Queen's Gambit decline territory. If bishop e7, you want to take on d5. After e takes d5, bishop f4, bishop g5,
yeah,
you get a pleasant version of normal stuff.
Vishy played bishop b4 here, which I remember I was hugely surprised by this at the time. I mean, I was watching it live from the same stage, and it looked to me like basically black is playing the Rogozin, but after queen c2, which is not really a very unnatural move from white, you limit your options by playing knight bd7 very early, or
even the Rogozin.
Yeah, it's actually
Nimzo.
That was actually the more salient point. It's like the queen c2 Nimzo, in which black in this position after knight f3 played knight bd7. It's exactly the same position.
The main move here is d takes c4. A lot of Kramnik and Anand games, and knight bd7 is not what people do here. Still, he got an easy draw against Anish Giri. Anish took little flack for that easy draw because he didn't try to put a lot of pressure on Vishy. But the opening work by Anish should normally be respected, and this queen c2 is a very tricky little move.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat curious that Magnus is still thinking, because it is the last relevant game in this variation.
We're operating under the assumption that he's followed the candidates, right? Who knows?
We are operating under that assumption, though. I think it's a fairly safe assumption.
Principal reply to this used to be considered to be d takes c4, when play can get very sharp after e4, c5, and white has all kinds of options. Some crazy stuff like d5, ed, e5 is sometimes...
Yeah, Magnus's choice is very curious to me.
Magnus played c6, which is strange, because white can go e4 in one go here.
Isn't this like... No, but that's actually the same variation, right?
It can be, yeah.
It transposes to what we all have seen at least once in our lives in the queen c2, what's it called, the semi-Slav.
Yeah, to explain, in the semi-Slav, c6, another main move here, there's a line with e3, knight bd7, queen c2, bishop to d6, and here the move e4, not the main line, but possible. After takes, black has the move bishop b4 check, which is a line that's supposed to more or less equalize, and Magnus is saying, I'm willing to play that with a very different move order. You start with e4 here.
Here I suspect bishop b4 check is the best move, right?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, from d6 you could argue for castling and playing e5 next move, as people do that sometimes there. But with the bishop on f8, this has to be the best option for what black has. And yes, this variation, I think Kramnik won some nice games from the white side in this position, but generally speaking, it's considered to be very close to equal.
Yeah, it's nothing. Kramnik won one game against Gelfand like 10 years ago, but it's nothing. I've been there. So c6, Vesseline probably has to do something else. C takes d5 is a move that comes to mind. When after ed bishop g5 you get, or bishop f4 again, you get the version you want of the Queen's Gambit declined. I'm curious if Magnus maybe wants to go c takes d here. Conventional wisdom says with the knight on d7.
The knight on d7, I wouldn't be particularly happy with black here. Bishop f4, it's like white got a very, very decent exchange Slav, right?
Yeah, the queen is wrong on c2 though for these structures. You go bishop e7, castles, b6, bishop e7,
not that wrong.
c8.
I mean, bishop d3, knight e5. This is the plan. You sometimes, I mean, in some of the lines of the exchange Slav, it lands on c2 eventually after visiting both b3 and a4. So it's not a horrible square. I mean, I would probably prefer it on d1, but it's fine on c2 as well.
So we'll see what Topalov does.
There's also maybe, there's also. Although probably that's a bit risky with the queen on c2. I was saying that maybe you can try for some gambit stuff with g3 in the current position, but that probably is a bad version.
Yeah.
Because there queen on c2 is just completely unused.
These moves don't work together.
Yeah, that's not very good. I mean, b3, but it's too slow. It's too slow. b3 followed by g3 was my idea. I mean, to just avoid all of this completely, but it probably doesn't work.
If you go b3, like if black went bishop d6, you could argue about e3 or e4 transposing back to semi-Slav territory, but here maybe bishop b4 is a move too, since...
Yeah, that probably is an improvement on what Vishy was doing against Giri in the candidates. So, yeah, so our, the main options we can list currently are e4, e3, I guess, transposing directly into semi-Slav, or c takes d5, trying to get either a Carlsbad structure or an exchange Slav structure and play it with a slight advantage.
Yeah. Magnus can play everything, but he's not known as a semi-Slav player, so Vesseline has had a lot of battles here. He might be thinking, is this guy really booked up in stuff like this, for example? So
but he does opt for c takes d5, so...
It's a solid choice.
Yeah, points to you for picking that. And Magnus, of course, I think, of course, is kind of justified here, because he doesn't really like boring symmetrical positions. He likes positions where there is scope for his, skills.
The thing is, normally you get the structure with the white bishop already on g5, and then often white reroutes it to f4. While the mainlines the argument against bishop f4 is black has an early c5, which is not valid here with the pawn c6. So
Yeah,
what's wrong with this is what I'm asking.
But actually, hang on a second. Apart from the two games we listed, Vishy also played this against Topalov himself. And they got a structure very close to this eventually after before bishop takes c3. And then black somehow managed to develop his bishop to f5 and trade it for the bishop on d3. And Vishy almost won that game, actually.
But are you time to do that here?
I'm not sure.
I think it's a little different, because you played c6 already. Bishop b4, e3.
Yeah, you're probably behind here on tempi. Yeah, you're probably behind on tempi here, so that won't work potentially.
So bishop g5 leads to mainline theory.
Yeah.
And bishop f4 strikes me as interesting at least.
Yeah, at the very least, this is a move you should consider, definitely.
We'll see what Vesseline decides on, and let's go. I'm not sure if it's your favorite opening, but it's an opening you enjoy playing, right? The Sicilian Knight of...
Yeah, I like it, but 6 bishop g5 is not a line I'm very proficient in, and the sideline they're playing currently I know very, very little about.
So e6 is the main move.
Yeah.
Knight b7 is played sometimes, but this is all mainline stuff. f4, here there's the infamous queen b6.
Yeah, there's queen b6, there's also queen c7, which is something I played myself on occasion, but yeah, h6, bishop h4, queen b6.
This is a recent trend that you throw in h6, bishop h4, makes a difference in some of these super sharp lines with queen d2.
Yeah, you're trying to dodge some of the possibilities white could have in the classical poison pawn, but here it adds the opportunity Anish availed of, yeah, because the bishop can come back to f2. So a3, just to
trap.
Yeah.
Don't blunder your queen.
It's a tarp, yeah. So a3, and against more or less any reasonable move here, knight e6 included, bishop f2 is a very decent reply. So,
well, I'm wondering, once again, I should know such stuff, but is this a game Grishuk against MVL from London? Maybe someone can tell us.
I'm not 100% certain. I can't really help you there. We could check, but we are live on air, and probably checking right now is not really feasible. We'll check in a break maybe. Okay, then I'll continue explaining the underlying ideas. So queen b6, you force a3, you slow white down a little bit, but on the other hand, after both knight c6 and bishop e7, which is what Maxim played, white has bishop f2, driving the queen back to c7. So black arguably wasted half a tempo, so to speak, bringing the queen to c7 in 2 moves instead of 1. But the bishop on f2 is also perhaps somewhat misplaced, or I guess that is a justification for what black is doing. Queen f3, knight bd7.
By the way, as usual,
yeah.
I was right. And in the game Grishuk MVL b5 was played, and MVL played a curious idea. I remember Grishuk mentioned, I've never looked at this idea with knight to c6, because in that game it was b5, g4, knight c6 in a very sharp fight. So probably Anish saw something he liked in that game.
Yeah, that actually explains why they're playing so fast, because this is really a sideline of the bishop g5 Najdorf, and the fact that Maxim has done this before explains why Anish is blitzing out his moves and seems to be very well prepared for this particular offshoot of the Najdorf. So the current game progressed: knight bd7, castles, b5. The obvious question, why not e5 winning material? Of course, it's to do with the fact that black has bishop b7, hitting the queen on f3, and material doesn't actually get lost. And Anish went g4 instead. And Maxim seems to be thinking for the first time in this game.
Yeah, it looks like standard stuff, but this inclusion of h6 and the bishop on f2 makes things a little different, right? What do you want? h4 g5?
You generally want h4 g5, yes. And also it's worth noting that the little move a3 white made on move 9 is actually very, very useful in these structures, because it means that apart from protecting the b2 pawn on move 9, it now works very, very well against the potential b5 before plans, because let's say black plays bishop b7 next move, which he probably will. With pawn on a2, b4 would be a huge threat, because white does have a somewhat weakened pawn on e4, and black can put a lot of pressure on it. But with the pawn on a3, black will need to rely on pieces attacking this pawn. Knight c5 actually is a very, very useful idea for the next move, and it will be somewhat awkward to. Probably white will have to develop the bishop to d3 actually to solidify his center. But the pawn on a3 is actually very, very useful in these structures. And the fact that white still has all of his pieces eyeing the b5 pawn means that supporting the b4 push with a5 is never possible. So the queenside situation for white is quite secure.
As a kid, I saw this idea that you want to go g5, and whatever white does, you want to fight for this e5 square. Is that a legal option here?
It definitely is, but once I see this, I start looking at, for some reason, it brings in me the immediate desire to somehow justify e5, bishop b7 and some tactics, but it probably doesn't work. Yeah. In some positions, the inclusion of g5 allows for some additional tactics, but here I don't see any. Yeah, g5 is a move, definitely. If white plays f5, you get, here it's just impossible because it actually blunders the pawn on g4.
But even if you don't take the pawn, the structure of the bishop to d7 looks solid for black, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's rock solid. It's very hard to shift the pieces in the center. So, yeah, apart from bishop b7, g5 is a major option here for black.
We'll see what MVL comes up with, of course. Arguably the biggest expert we have these days on the Najdorf, plays it more or less exclusively at this level, and yeah, he's gonna understand his choices. But Anish has zoomed in on this line. It's his preparation, so you gotta be very, very careful. He has Anish in book.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, and it's a tricky position to to assess from the outside. I mean, for us, lots and lots of options, and we have 5 games to cover. So we'll shift from this for a while and wait for MVL to pick a move.
Let's go to the creative Mr. Kramnik. Or maybe it's more the creative Mr. Li Chao, because he's played an opening we don't see all that often at this level.
Although against Kramnik, people do play this quite a bit.
Really?
He actually, yeah. I mean, there's a number of games. I think he had this against Mamedov, I think. Also, he played in a rapid in Baku some years back. So that's one game. He also, well, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember all of his opponents, but I've seen him play this, the black side of this, at least 2 or 3 times in the past, I don't know, 5 years. It's not uncommon to try this to avoid playing the Berlin against him.
But isn't this move wrong? You're supposed to develop with tempo, like get an initiative, get the knight out, attack this pawn.
It's maybe not the most critical, but dodging, why did the chicken cross the road? To avoid. These days, the answer used to be to avoid Kasparov's opening preparation, but Kasparov is no longer an active chess player. So these days, I think it's Kramnik's opening preparation.
So knight c3, knight f6. You won't see f4 at this level because of the d5.
Not really,
It's fine. Therefore, Li Chao chooses a slow setup, g3. Wants to go bishop g2, and then have a look around, often play knight e2. Black has many choices here. I like d5, c6 is a move, bishop b4, bishop c5.
He played this in the World Cup. Who was it against? He was probably against Bruzon, I think. I think he had this in the Baku World Cup against Bruzon, but I could be wrong. I mean, my recall is not total there. But bishop c5 followed by c6 is an interesting idea. I haven't seen this before. At least not at the highest level.
I've played this myself, so it has been played at the very highest level. But yeah, the thing is, if black develops slowly, let's say plays d6, castles, knight c6 and so on, then white has a slightly easier game. You go knight e2, castles, d3, h3, king h2, f4.
Yeah, all that.
And it's a little easier to play. So black wants to go for the d5 push quickly. And the main argument against it is what Li Chao does in the game, that after this you can inflict black with an isolated pawn. But I think this is where Kramnik's homework comes into play. He's going to have checked this position quite carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. For him to play this line, he is not doing this, as a spur of a moment thing. He's looked at this before and he feels this is fine. I mean, the position actually becomes very concrete.
Castles, castles, and bishop g4, developing with tempo. I've seen this before as well, but as usual, the goldfish memory problem. f3 might be a move here, but of course it's kind of ugly to restrict your bishop and to self-pin.
You could run into some things here, like rook e8 maybe even as a move, no? Maybe not, I don't know. Rook e8, fg4, knight c6, I was kind of curious about this. Rook takes e2, I thought. This probably does work, but I'm not sure about the rest of it.
Maybe, yeah, this seems to work.
Yeah, but also f3, some quieter moves are also possible. No, this does work, yeah, but after knight c6 there's a number of options, and also f takes g4 is not forced. So I'm not sure this is exactly what Vladimir was planning against f3, but not playing f3 is not a surprise.
So queen d3, normally enough move. Kramnik keeps playing very directly. Takes on d4.
Yeah.
Which you don't want to do unless it's good, because it's a bishop, but he develops very fast. Probably wants to push the pawn.
The structure is very reminiscent of the positions you sometimes get in the. Let me just show, because it's easier than to describe. If black wants to play the Sveshnikov via this move order and then suddenly changes his mind, let's put it like this. You go for the Sveshnikov and then you suddenly decide, no, the Sveshnikov is a horrible opening, I will have, horrible pawn structure, no good, must play something more solid. Then you can do this. And the main line here is e5, e5, and we get pretty much the same pawn structure, apart from the fact that white never really has any time here to fianchetto his bishop. The bishop always goes to d3. So what they have on the board right now is, in terms of pawn structure, very, very similar to that, almost identical to that, but the bishop on g2 changes things a little bit.
Yeah, but black also won a bit of time, right? I believe the queen goes, I don't know where it goes, let's put it here. You want to push this pawn.
You probably want to play d4 as early as possible, although here white has knight d5, for instance, any of those two moves. And if white consolidates, he will be quite a bit better. But there is always counterplay against the c2 pawn, basically. The pawn on d4 gives black a spatial advantage and also counterplay against the white queen side. So maybe not the immediate d4, especially with the queen on f4, because with the queen on f4 you cut your own c1 bishop a little bit, and bishop g5 is no longer a threat. So you can maybe, as black,
even about passive moves like
bishop e6 or maybe bishop h5 g6 actually. I'm not sure it's where it belongs currently. So there are options here for black, and also you can be absolutely certain that Vladimir will not start thinking for a while yet. We will see him continue blitzing his moves out for the foreseeable.
And we've seen that many times, people trying to surprise him by some sideline, and what normally happens is he blitzes out 18 moves, and
that never.
He knows everything. You can't surprise him. You gotta play the main lines.
That never really works exactly as planned, or almost never. Let's put it like this. I mean, there have been notable successes, like once every 5 years you do get him out of book, but.
You still have to beat him.
Yeah, and even after that. But anyway, Maxim does play g5, so
skills.
You were very correct on that point. And there has been an interesting development in the Topalov-Carlsen game.
What happened? He played bishop f4.
He did play bishop f4, but after knight h5, he went kind of hardcore there a little bit. Instead of something normal like bishop g5, which just...
but if you go bishop g5, then you've sort of lost the tempo, because black goes bishop e7, and this is a line that's very fashionable, which Magnus has played himself amongst Levon Aronian, for example, against Levon Aronian, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Get rid of this bishop. So
yeah, that actually is a full tempo.
That makes a lot of sense.
That actually is a full tempo. So, and if you go back, it doesn't really make much sense, right? Bishop d2, bishop e7.
You don't have a good move. You don't want to play g3 in this structure.
You generally just
e4 is good.
But I think black is developed enough not to worry about e4 at all. So that could have been a drawback to bishop f4. But Veselin supported it by playing g3 very, very fast. So he is either very confident about this structure, or he's perhaps looked at this before. And I wanted to point out a curious trick, but it doesn't work here. If black plays bishop e7,
it doesn't work.
There's this temptation to go for this fantastic cheapo, but it just costs you a piece, because bishop e4 check creates a luft for the queen and it escapes. But Magnus is also not fazed by this development. He's taken on f4 very quickly and played knight b6, which is also a standard move in these structures.
This knight normally wants to end up here, if possible.
So you create a reasonably sensible route for it to get to d6 via perhaps you play, let's say if white plays knight e5 here, you could maybe make an argument for playing g6, following it up by bishop f5.
I think knight e5 might be a mistake, because now black isn't time to do this.
Yeah, so start with e3 maybe.
With this to be able to
g6 bishop d3, correct. You normally don't want to play knight c4 though, because then after white takes on c4, he gets this huge pawn center which might start rolling down the board and just crush you completely. And Veselin does play e3, somewhat unsurprisingly.
It's a very complicated position. Black has the two bishops and white has these double pawns, but it's much easier for white to develop. Let's say bishop d3, long castle, knight to e5, or rook on g1.
We are being made to look somewhat foolish with our, or at least I'm being made to look somewhat foolish with my let's pick a safe result and predict a draw in this game, because this position has the potential of becoming extremely sharp.
Yeah, normally one side ends up on top here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's highly likely that white will castle queenside and will try to, especially if Magnus castles kingside himself, which might not happen though. Some kind of a developing plan with bishop d6, queen c7, for instance, bishop somewhere in long castles might be possible here.
Yeah, especially if white castles queenside here, you can't survive castling kingside against a rook on g1 and this battery. It's not going to happen. I don't know, I'd pick white, but the question is black in time to develop unscathed? I don't know how you start. Bishop d7, queen e7.
Yeah, it's not that easy to pick moves here, because bishop e6 doesn't feel quite right. Although actually prompting f5 is not such a bad idea, because f5 kills off a lot of white's own ideas. Placing a knight on e5 becomes more difficult. The bishop on d3 looks a lot stupider.
No, I'd be more worried about knight g5, but it feels a little premature. And even then, if you're not losing material.
Yeah, you could play queen e7 anyway.
Yeah,
h6 I don't
this
like,
pawn
but
doesn't
yeah.
look so tempting. Who knows though? This could heat up, but knight g5 feels a little off topic. So the position you would normally get is something like whatever.
g6, I suppose, yeah. Followed by long castles.
Some stuff like this. And if black achieves this, I don't think he's in much trouble, even though neither is white.
Yeah, even in these positions, sometimes white manages to create something on the queen side by playing rook c1, knight a4, bringing the rook up to c3, and
It's never mate.
yeah, we all know my opinions on the existence of mate in chess, but it's still there's great potential for an interesting game here. And let's go back for a second to the Najdorf, because Anish is, as we were saying all along, Anish is a reasonably well-prepared guy.
He does his homework.
G5 has been met more or less instantly by h4, g takes f4, and a quiet move bishop b2, which is in preparation for knight e5, knight takes g4.
Also,
which actually
too sometimes threatens.
Yes,
It's going to be parried
but
by
actually,
any normal.
let's explain something to me. If I play knight e5 here, queen takes f4, knight e takes g4. Bishop takes g4, I play e5. I think I can explain something to you, maybe? Queen takes f6, yeah, that was what I was going for. Knight d5, queen d8, knight c6, but bishop takes g4 seems to work, which makes me incredibly sad. Because that was a beautiful idea, but it just ends with white seemingly playing a pawn down endgame. Bishop takes c8 here, but that probably is too futuristic. But bear with me for a second. Yeah, hang on. Bishop b7.
I didn't count the material for a while. How
So
are we
far,
doing
it's two pieces for the queen. No, this you cannot do because there's a 4.
I should not blunder the 4.
Yeah, this you cannot do. You have to play rook b8 or rook a7, one of those two. Probably rook b8 so as not to get completely skewered with the bishop on d4. Yeah, and here if I take, I go bishop d4, you have a check, which saves you material. But what is this position?
I don't know. You brought us into this mess. You get us out of it.
It's a position I like looking at, but that's the extent of, I'm not willing to commit any further than this. I have a feeling white could have enough compensation here.
I have a feeling it's not a line you want to play if your opponent is blitzing, unless you really have to. Maybe that's Anish's point. Maybe he knows there's some forced stuff that works, but even in this position,
there's also
there must be all kinds of other moves.
All kinds of shots on b5 that need to be calculated. Yeah, I mean there's plenty of moves here. You need to be extremely wary of if you're black. Takes? Why is this so? Queen somewhere c5 is impossible somewhat. Yeah, let's say c6.
I should probably think before I sacrifice all of Anish's pieces.
Extremely messy, extremely messy. Yeah, 96, I think I can take on e4.
Yeah, that's what made me pause.
No, this.
Sorry.
This probably is bad, but I can take on e4. But I mean, variation obviously continues. We can give a check on b5. I probably want to go to f8 because after king e7, I have a feeling I might get mated. No, bishop c5. There's a check with rook takes e6 might be fair. No, rook e6, f takes c. Yeah, we're sorry if we're blundering.
Let me just show this because I like it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this
check and counter check. King doesn't have a lot of squares.
This is gorgeous. Queen d6, maybe rook takes here.
Yes, something.
Rook takes looks interesting. Knight e4, yeah, it's a huge mess. Maybe bishop takes wins. Who knows? Yeah, it's a very attractive variation to calculate when it's on your pieces. Basically, what we're trying to say here is that, from the safety of the commentary booth, we can have a tremendous amount of fun throwing everything at black and seeing what sticks. But
problem is if black plays slowly, like if you want to keep the structure, whatever, white is very well developed to start harassing the pieces.
The knight on f6 has no good squares. This is problematic for black.
Okay, even if we play a little better, let's say this, and black is just not in time. Here, no, even gh6 is a move, but it feels like worse things could happen.
This actually doesn't look horrible to me, I have to say. gh6 bishop f8 is, I think, completely fine for black. And if I can castle queenside next move, I think I shouldn't be panicking here.
maybe
as black.
can do this.
You can, but it probably will get ignored.
Castle.
I will even maybe throw in the... Will I? I'm not sure. Castle, bishop f7. Yeah, I could maybe... I probably should be slightly more worried about this than I am currently. Yeah, bishop h5 could be a problem. Let's go back for a second. Creates a huge threat of knight takes e6, obviously, which has to be addressed somehow. There is queen c4, but it feels slow and incorrect.
Clumsy.
Yeah, bishop h5 is a strong move. I fail to appreciate how annoying it is.
Weird position.
Yeah, so my initial assessment that this game will be very interesting to watch seems to...
E5 is out of the question, right? It keeps
Not
the pawn,
completely,
but to give up
but
this
yeah.
square just feels...
It's not even the square as such, it's just that you can't really stop g5 comfortably, and then the d5 square will become an issue, and that one is a bigger problem.
MVL's thinking here, this looks like the obvious move to play, but you have
You
to
could
sort of
maybe
calculate.
argue that because of all the dangers we've just demonstrated, trying to put the knight on c5 and the other one on g7 could be better, but...
Can't I go all Fischer on you?
Well, I could start with bishop b7.
Ah, sorry.
No, well, hang on.
My point was I have no idea if this works, but this is some classical Keras Fischer stuff in a very similar position.
Yeah, this exists.
This could work.
This could work, yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily good because black does get a lot of pawns for the material he will have to give up, but... Well, give up is maybe strong, but...
Bishop b7.
So bishop b7,
concerned
g5.
about g5 if you don't.
Yeah, but then I'm not in time to put the knight on c5. I can always transpose to knight e5,
Sure.
knight f7, but knight c5, knight f7, I'm just not getting. Okay. So let's see. Sorry. It does feel like the most sort of hardcore attempt at refuting White's idea is knight e5, knight g4. But as you correctly said, I mean, it's not something you play happily if you don't know exactly what the...
I have another noobish question. Is this a move or is this just suicide?
Definitely is a move, but yeah.
I don't trust it, but I couldn't see an immediate refutation. So if g5, I want to jump to g4 and put this knight here.
Sure. That actually closes down some of the avenues of attack for White. So
Once again, e5 could be a question, that one I'm not sure about.
with the same idea, e6, yeah?
Yeah.
e6, I probably take on f3, you take on f3. But here I can play knight takes f6, I think. Bishop takes and take on g4 with actually even the pawn, yeah. I think I'd be very happy with black. I mean, at first glance, it seems like black will just overrun White on the king side here. So yeah, h5 is definitely an option Maxim should be considering here. We don't know if it's good or not, but it's one of the moves that need to be assessed properly.
Well, it looks like Maxim is out of book, which is, well, at least to me it would be very unpleasant feeling if your opponent blitzes out moves in such a sharp position where your life might be depending on crazy stuff like this.
Yeah, it's not a particularly comfortable situation to find yourself in, and also even let's say if you looked at this once and you don't remember exactly what's happening, I mean, it happened to me on a number of occasions.
It's even worse normally.
Yeah, you go for a very sharp line, and then being at the board and looking at the position when you're actually playing it, as opposed to looking at it in the, you know, in the quiet of your laboratory. Let's use a long
laboratory.
Well, let's use a long board when a short one would suffice. That's always a good rule. And things come into much sharper focus, and you start seeing all the things you may have missed at home. I remember actually here in 2014, I think in round 2 I was black against Fabiano Caruana in a Norway chess 2014, and I went for a very long, very sharp line in the Paulsen. And the moment I realized which precise subline Fabiano is headed for, and I had pages and pages of analysis on it, I immediately realized exactly what I missed. But by that point you can't even turn away. And that's a weird feeling, and not a particularly comfortable one.
MVL was joking during the candidates. He said he was following the tournament. Of course, he wasn't playing himself, and everybody played e4, e5, which made him wonder, did they all refute the Najdorf? And
No.
he said he would find out during Norway chess, and it looks like he's getting a very fair first shot by Anish Giric.
Yeah, that does look like it's a very, very interesting attempt. I mean, it has to be said that this is perhaps not the most central line of the Najdorf, and
Also, no one refuted this. I'm speaking slightly tongue-in-cheek. Normally, this is like one-game lines, which are incredibly unpleasant to meet over the board, but there will be a defense. But to come up with it here, MVL has his work cut out for him.
Sure, and it will take him some time to settle on a move here. I'm pretty sure, unless he actually looked at this in detail and he is now just rechecking what his notes say. We don't really know what his situation is.
We don't, so let's go somewhere else where we know the situation. Pavel Elyanov's king is no longer allowed to castle.
That is very, very true. I believe I've seen this position before.
Me too.
Isn't this the game in which... Hang on. Berka Shimelin, is this line or...
Can't remember. I'm gonna look it up. Maybe it's some Mamedyarov stuff. Like knight 3 is not supposed to be the main move here. They go e5, but Black has been holding himself there, his own. Knight 3, knight f2 is positionally very desirable because this knight doesn't have an ideal square. If it goes to e2, it normally has to move again. It's good here, but slow.
Yeah.
So d6 threatening ed takes. Gotta go knight f2.
No, he went
or
knight f4. No, knight f4 is, I think, the main move here. Well, more or less, I think, forcing Black to play e5. I mean, e takes d5, I think, is still a move you can make.
Why not knight f2 here? We're not on time, yeah? Like take and take here or something.
I think some comparisons are not in White's favor. Yeah, the inclusion of all of these moves in d6 and castles are not in White's favor. I think I even looked at this at one time in my life. I can't really remember the conclusions, but...
So e5 is a bad move positionally for Black because you want to maintain the tension in the center, but once again this knight does not have an ideal square. He went here having spent 2 temp because he could have gone here immediately and provoking d6 and e5.
Yeah, and this
Who
is...
does that favor?
It's unclear. Black does close the position quite drastically by doing this, but on the other hand, he gains a lot of time, and Black continues to ignore the fact that the pawn on b5 is hanging, as you will see in a second, because b takes c4, I guess...
If you take here, the knight moves again, right? It's
I think
already
knight
moved
g3.
10 times. What's one more?
Knight g3, bishop b2. Eventually, it might end up on e3 via either f1 or f5, and yeah, b takes
Hanging
c4.
on to this pawn, even if White plays slowly here.
Yeah.
I'd take White all day because this
Absolutely,
is
yeah. This is never the way to play these positions, because Black just kills off his entire counterplay by doing this.
So you gotta go active. And that's
So knight
very good.
h5 creating the idea of f5 more than anything else, I think, and queen h4 check is, I mean, it will become relevant in a second, but it's only relevant because White is so concerned with Black playing f5 that
It's also prophylaxis against this knight g3 move, which White wanted to play, but now it can be met with queen h4.
Yeah, that is a huge issue as well. Yeah, but g4 trying to at least drive Black back somewhat. But Black is not really does not really play this line to go back. So queen h4 check, very obvious, very natural move. King g2, and now knight f4 and not knight f6. Once again, Black wants to destabilize the pawn structure as much as possible.
If knight f6, once again, this knight gets here and can jump here. The king is not getting mated so quickly on c2.
Not getting mated at all, I think, on c2. It's behind the pawn structure, which is as solid as this one is. You're just not worried about your king safety on c2 at all.
With the knight here, you can't really go knight g3 and tolerate it. So you have to take. I also have a feeling this has all been played before.
Sure, even king c2 is still
King
theory.
C2,
This is what I was trying to check with you, because I think there's a game maybe in this exact line which my friend Vasily Melin won against Ferenc Berkes. Very nice game, which ended in a lot of beautiful tactics. But it may have been a related line and not this particular one.
I'll find out. Of course, we're following a game by Jon Ludvig Hammer, but no, that took a different course later on. But Hammer, the Norwegian number 2 and Scandinavian number 2, also played the move knight to h3. And this position after knight f4 also featured in this tournament last year in the game Grishuk against Topalov, where Topalov took on d5. Very valid way to treat the position as well.
Sure. I mean, one could also try taking with the pieces. I mean, c takes d5 is not forced, so...
And you were right, they're following a game. Berkish against Yemelin. King to c2. All of this has been played, where Yemelin took on c3 in the position they currently have.
Yeah, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, b4, trying to once again create squares for his pieces, and he ended up winning a very beautiful game. I remember we discussed it with him, and he was very happy with that particular effort. Yeah, hugely messy position, and no idea what's going on here, really.
I have a feeling Pavel and probably Harry as well both have an idea what's going on here.
Sure. They should. Both the speed of their play and just generally, this is a line. I mean, so far none of them made anything, played anything new. All this has been played at a very reasonable level. So,
yeah, black faces a choice: bc4, bishop c3. Gotta do something, because if white gets a move, bishop f4 or knight b5 are both threats. So.
Sure. No, I think bishop c3. I mean, I would generally want to exchange this knight. I think it's an important piece, and also this bishop on b4 wasn't doing very much. So, but bishop takes c4 is what Hare Krishna settles on. I still feel we will probably see the capture on c3 at some point, because I think this knight is generally a better piece than the bishop on b4, and you want to trade them off.
Jump.
Yeah, unless it jumps away, obviously.
But the normal move looks...
Yeah, I'm not sure what the plan is here. Probably you start by playing queen f6 or something. Queen d2, I guess, or maybe bishop g3. Once again, it's very difficult. It's not the position where you can correctly predict what the best moves are without spending some time actually analyzing it properly. So we're just throwing stuff around.
It's very sharp, that's for sure. Could go either way. If white manages to consolidate, you can just be winning on structure, or you can get checkmated.
Yeah, both things are very much in play here. And there's also a very curious position up top in our in one of the games we haven't revisited in a while. Let's go all the way.
All the way up.
Yeah.
Dr. Levon.
Yeah.
Have we visited this at all?
Well, we kind of... No, we actually haven't, yeah.
The Berlin. We tend to ignore the Berlin for the first 2 hours, but nowadays Berlin sort of means just a board full of pieces, because no one goes for the end game. Everybody plays d3.
Yeah.
Niels included.
Yeah, and this is
a line MVL has been toying with, this early knight bd2. I'm sure there's some subtleties. One big point, I guess, is that here you can go here instantly, which I'm sure is theory as well.
Yeah, I think even this has been tested, and black, if he wants, can even do this, I believe. But and also, isn't this? Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the position in the Anand Nakamura game, right? Knight g4 takes. And instead of knight f3, Vishy played castles, to which Nakamura replied by playing a6, b5, and d6. I'm pretty sure this is how it went.
Thought there was this
maybe,
move order.
Was castles? Yeah. Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. So knight bd2, castles, bishop takes c6, and here Lev did something slightly tricky.
But all these sidelines are so confusing. I'm sure this has been played at the highest level as well. It might be.
I think it's Caruana against somebody. Yeah, Caruana, probably Anand. Yeah,
either Anand Caruana or Caruana Anand.
Vike 15, I think.
I think Baden-Baden 15.
Oh yeah, I remember it was.
We know so much.
We pretend to know a lot. Yeah, but
not that sure.
Yeah, this is an interesting, because normally black takes with a d pawn here, and taking with a d pawn means b5 is not going to happen.
Sorry.
If you take with the d pawn, you're not losing your e5 pawn, because there's also this queen d4 move, which will secure you against material loss. But bc6 is a very, very adventurous way of playing this.
Yeah, it's about small nuances. Like we've seen in the Blitz, for example, if white plays a move order like, let's say, this, then black can go for this setup with bishop e6 and knight d7. Yeah. Well, we're starting with this castles, bishop c6, dc.
Yeah, you can
this
go
is still theory,
here,
but at least it's slightly different.
Yeah, true.
But here black has this extra option of sacrificing this pawn, knight e5. I believe this is the way this game went. And
yeah, I think they're still following it up, maybe even up to white's 12th move. Black just goes for purely positional compensation for the pawn, at least for now, because white is completely tied up to the protection of the...
keep this guy.
Yeah, the protection of the e4 pawn, and it's very difficult for him to actually develop any of his pieces properly. So h3, bishop h5, queen e2, h6, rook e1. Well, both of these moves look very natural from white, because you do have a very healthy extra pawn on e4, which cannot really be challenged currently by other pawns apart from the d5 one. But all of your queenside, starting with the knight on d2, is very, very tied to the protection of this pawn. I mean, the knight is tied to the protection of the pawn, and the bishop on c1 and the rook on a1 are bystanders for now.
h6 was the novelty compared to that Anand game we were talking about, and we were both wrong, because it was in this very tournament last year in Stavanger 2015. I knew I was doing the press conference, but I got the tournament wrong anyway. So they are following a game played here and played h6, which I believe h6 or a5 were the computer suggestions. So witty as I was, I asked the guys, why not those obvious moves? And yeah, they say, yeah, it's possible and so on, but d4 was played, which sort of equalized, but maybe there was a spot later down the road. And of course, Levon also doesn't want to suck the life out of the position. He wants to keep some margin for error. I would
Absolutely,
guess.
yeah. Rook e1 is natural, but now after a5, Niels is thinking, because he needs to settle on some way to disentangle himself. I mean, there is queen
Let's
f1.
go radical. e5.
e5, knight d7.
g4.
Bishop g6, I guess.
d4.
Bishop
Promise
b6.
I'll be lost in a couple moves, but at least I kept my extra pawn.
I don't know
You
about
go
lost, but
c5.
you will be in a you will be in a spot where
It's a lot of counterplay.
yeah, c3, bishop e4 is a move. Also, just taking and c5 is very strong, seemingly. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how clear this stuff is, but it
Take
feels like
take on
there's a lot of
d4.
compensation.
Well, I mean, black will be
yeah,
at least
I get the pawn
fine.
back, yeah.
I mean, if all else fails, we can just win the piece. I mean, the pawn straight away and go from there.
So, tricky spot for Niels here. Can you bail out if you want to, like just give the pawn back and say, okay.
I'm not
I meant
sure,
no
to be
disrespect.
honest. d4, knight e4, bishop e3, bishop d6. I would pick black here in a heartbeat.
Yeah, this looks passive.
Yeah, despite the pawn structure on the queen side seemingly being a problem for black, the activity of his pieces far outweighs those considerations.
So Niels needs to come up with something smart here. Does black have a threat though? If I just, I don't know, go a4 and then b3, or maybe b3 immediately. I'm reluctant to allow this, but
It's possible, but there's also... Yeah, I wanted to say bishop d4, bishop c3, but I'm not sure this is very good. It's a plan, but I'm not sure it actually makes much sense for black. a4, bishop b2, a3 might force white to take on f6, but I don't think...
Here.
Yeah, but I don't think taking on f6 is that bad, actually. Because now I can maybe go for...
Black is fine here.
Black is fine and white is still incredibly cramped here. Yeah. So an interesting position, and a position where Niels will have to start showing his understanding and creativity, because it seems like he was prepared in general for this turn of events, and for a while he's been following the stem game, so to speak. But now they're on their own, and well, at least he is on his own. Lev probably is still following his notes.
Yeah. But this also feels like a position where Lev just evaluated, okay, I have enough compensation, I can play this, but it's hard to generate notes on c3, a3, b3, a4.
Yeah, the move I mentioned earlier actually has been played.
Queen f1.
Yeah, Niels went.
Ugly.
Not particularly attractive, but you're trying to lure black into winning the pawn back immediately, and then you will develop all of your pieces, and probably will even be slightly better. Knight e4, bishop e3. Yeah, here, because so much stuff has been exchanged, you definitely take white. But Lev takes about 5 seconds to just play a4.
Yeah, he just wants to play it slow.
Yeah, he's in no hurry whatsoever to recover the sacrifice material. By playing a4, he gains more space on the queen side, stops knight b3 for the for the rest of the game. So the knight on g2 feels even more restricted now. And yeah, if you need to start considering moves like knight h2, it feels weird.
Looks very pleasant. And let's not forget, Aronian is a martial player, so he loves like sacrificing a pawn for initiative, and here you have that for sure. Normally don't get that much in the martial action.
You probably need to play e5. I think it's time.
D4,
And d4, yeah. I think this is the point of queen f1. We couldn't do this earlier because bishop takes d4 would be a move, but here we can. But still, after bishop b6, the compensation is tremendous. c4 maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
But after g takes c4, you will have to take with the queen, which may not be that bad though.
Could think about g4.
Or could think about g4, knight c4 as well, yeah.
It's always risky.
I mean, we've been praising Black's play and Black's position for a long time now. I mean, it's worth pointing out that if white pieces do come out of the corner, he is a healthy pawn up and will be better / winning. But he is still some way away from them.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be tough for Niels because Levon got what he wanted. He got play position where you have to take very non-standard, difficult decisions. Well, Niels, of course, is very capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So is Levon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we speak about the character of this position, I think both of them would like to play black here.
Maybe two, yeah.
I feel quite strongly about that actually. I think Niels, in general, is someone who prefers to sacrifice material. If given a choice between sacrificing material and playing something with an extra pawn where you have to defend and be passive, he'll pick the sacrificial side in a second.
By the way, if white ever takes on d5, it doesn't help him that much, right?
C takes,
CD.
yeah.
Let's say whoever takes.
Rook e8, queen e8. Yeah, you would want to play knight b3 here, but it's no
yeah.
longer possible. Yeah, this is very martialish in spirit, and yeah, should be good for black.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It's very hard to get the pieces off.
Yeah, you just don't really have many moves that you like here. I mean, you can knight e5 maybe, but it will get driven back.
The pieces.
Knights.
Little concerned about tricks here, but
Yeah, a3 might be a move, but maybe we can just ignore it. Queen d6, knight to f3. Is there any tactical way to solve black's issues here? Don't see it, yeah.
Some hope.
Don't see it. Yeah, maybe e takes d5 is definitely an option. Maybe queen takes. I understand it's ugly, but it, there's a lot of control black exercises here over the center, and stopping both 94 and 95.
Yeah, I like it.
Once again, what's the next move? It's very difficult to improve white's position here. c4 queen d6 doesn't really do very much.
No, you feel like bailing out already, but it's not so easy to bail out.
But the thing is, it's not bailing out. You will be worse. I mean, if you give the pawn back here by playing 94, you're in a serious amount of trouble because you're still passive and everything is hanging.
Yeah, you're worse. Oh no, bishop e3. You can try to survive, but it's not going to be fun.
No, you definitely don't want to do any of that. Okay, we'll leave Niels with this choice, I think, because it will be wise, I think, for him to take some time on this decision. It's an important decision. And let's revisit Lichau Kramnik.
So Lichau went to c5, Kramnik pushed, and little Zwischenzug.
Yup.
h3.
Interesting idea. He wants, in the Sicilian line we discussed, the knight very, very often aims to go to e2 and then f4. So he is trying to drive the bishop away from g4 towards, let's say, e6, to play knight e4, knight e2, and then knight.
I thought what he wanted was bishop h5, knight e4. And this bishop
that as well, but I mean, especially after h3, you want to play bishop e6, I think, because here knight e4 is not possible because the pawn on h3 will be hanging. That also isn't quite true, actually. There's queen h5 in the end there, but f5 is a move, but let's not get carried away. I think the idea is to play knight e2 here, to be honest, because f4 is a very, very good square for this knight.
Yeah,
so an interesting move, and it seems like it caught Vladimir somewhat unawares, because he's been thinking about this position for a while. He's not blitzing anymore. So
he also has the option of taking this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. But these two bishops will be monstrous, especially if you take on b2 and take on g4.
Not the prettiest pawn structure, but very pretty bishops.
Yeah, those. White is never ever worse here, and he might even entertain thoughts of fighting for advantage despite being a pawn down, like rook a g1, queen b6, queen c3. and play for huge initiative. I mean, those are tremendous bishops.
Can I start with this?
You could, but first of all, here I will take and go g5, and I will claim I'm like
Yeah, you're better.
much better. Yeah, this is a very unpleasant endgame. You need to have something to show for this before you enter any of these endgames. You want to be at least one pawn up.
So yeah, it feels wrong to take on c3, but it's certainly something you have to consider here. Kramnik, he likes to solve his problems directly, right? He doesn't want to end up in a slightly worse sort of position.
Yeah, there's also a version of this when you take on h3 and you take on c3, and the bishop on h3 is slightly misplaced, allowing black to start occupying the central squares with knight e4 or maybe knight d4 here, creating all these ideas too.
Well, still have bishops.
Discombobulate white somewhat, but yeah, I mean, if this gets driven back, and the bishop on h3 actually controls the all-important c8 square, so rook c8 right now is impossible because of that. If white
Unless
gets...
we're going for brilliancy price, rook c8, bishop c8, queen d5, but we might not succeed.
Yeah, that probably is. Bishop takes b7
Yeah.
wins on the spot, yeah. Yeah, would be a nice try, but loses unfortunately. And also, even something quiet, maybe I like this better.
Yeah, I think white is better here. You just have the
Rook
two
e8
bishops
and
and free,
just,
bishop
let's say
e3.
bishop e3 and just king g2, and yeah, black is not doing that badly in this particular position because moving the pawn from c2 to d3 maybe doesn't favor white all that much. But yeah, it's definite that it's white who is playing for advantage here. So yeah, interesting position, and no immediate obvious choice for black. Maybe bishop h5, knight e4, bishop g6. But we have, do we? Yeah, maybe
No,
this.
bishop e4.
Bishop g5, bishop e4, and
Bishop f6 is sort of a standard
but
material distribution as well, but
yeah.
feels like black should be in time to be alright here. Takes
Do we
bishop
take?
e4, and I don't know what we do. Queen e6 or rook c8 first, or like there's options.
But this looks nice for white. I mean, it's not
Maybe
very much.
consolidate, sure.
Yeah, it's not very much, but you will have some pressure, and the bishop against knight generally favors the bishop at least a little bit. So I like this h3 move. I think Lichao's reaction is very interesting here.
Yeah, he's come to play. Easy draw yesterday, relatively, against MVL today. Got Kramnik out of book, it looks like.
Yeah, very, very curious. Let's go down the list.
Yeah, just very brief update. Niels has gone for this e5, d4 stuff. Levon, of course, played bishop b6, and I guess c4 is his idea here.
c4 is the main thing you want to consider here, because if you allow c5, c takes d4, and the second c5, you will give black a lot of play against the center. So you want to be more concrete. You want to stop this if
Looks
at all.
like the obvious move, even though this seems to be legal as well. Just
Yeah, c5, bishop a5, and then knight to e6 and continue positionally, because knight on d2 still has no squares. Yeah, knight f8 is possible, and c4, c5 might be possible.
yeah, I was wondering.
C
about
takes d4, cd, cd, and who knows what's going on. Knight c4 though, that was what was worrying me, but maybe bishop f3 and knight c5 is good. Yeah, it's a huge mess. It's a huge mess, and I have to say that Niels is quite clearly ignoring my, old man's advice of taking his time on decisions like this. He feels that this is the principled way to continue, and there's no reason to dwell on it too long. And he also blitzes out c4. The tempo of his play is quite
Should also
impressive.
be said, though, I'm not sure we talked much about the time control. Players don't have a lot of time. They have 1 hour 40 for the first 40 moves with no increment, so there is a real time control on move 40, and therefore it can be very dangerous to spend a lot of time, because you might end up in time trouble.
That is a very
The
valid.
sharks might smell that.
Sure, that is a very valid point. Time management will become an issue here for everybody, I think. Yeah, this is a somewhat punishing time control. It's quite strict.
I talked to Niels about it. He says he likes it. It's part of being a player that you have to manage your time, and I always felt that this increment before move 40, sort of, I don't know, some parental control thingy so that you can't lose on time, but I never got the point of it. It's more fun for us if someone has 10 seconds for 10 moves, and the players have the same amount of time to spend. They're just not forced to use 30 seconds per move. So I'm quite fond of it. And Levin blitzes out knight f8, showing he's also not in a hurry to complicate things. He just wants to improve.
And actually, in his case, I'd not be surprised at all if this was still preparation.
Still Armenian home cooking.
Yeah. Very good, I have to tell you. Armenian home cooking.
Been there.
Highly recommended for anyone and everyone.
Yeah, it's tricky. c5, bishop a5, it's just hard to play for white. While black's moves are more or less
you
obvious.
play queen d3, you play...
Okay. It's also not a pretty square.
No,
Get hit.
even knight d6 first. Yeah, it's kind of ugly.
This.
It's kind of ugly because, yeah, none of these pieces can really be challenged. And those bishops, you know, we were just talking about the bishops in the Lichau-Kramnik game on g2 and b2, and this is kind of the normal monstrous bishops you get. But these bishops on h5 and a5, they are exerting a tremendous amount of pressure over the white position. And in the Najdorf, MVL took his sweet time and played rook g8.
That feels non-principled somehow, but mainly it's just a cop-out because we didn't look at it.
Yeah, feels slower than what we were discussing. But also,
Point is here, yeah?
yeah, that should work. That should work because there will be no jumps to reply to it.
So
but
being
rook hg1
renowned attacking deviant that I am.
Takes 90, hang on, 95.
Ah, you throw 95, eh?
Yes. And knight fg4. I think this probably is the... Although bishop h4 is now worrying me. I was very happy with this for about 5 seconds, but I'm starting to have my doubts. There's also knight h7 with the same idea. Maybe it's better. Here, yeah. Or knight. Yeah, let's try knight f7.
Oh.
But yeah, I'm worried I'm blundering some kind of bishop takes b5 interposition, which will stop me from playing bishop takes g5 properly later on.
Chaos, I don't have a clue, but it feels risky.
It does feel
Also,
risky, but
you're
also
off,
one consideration you always have in these positions when your opponent is walking around the stage looking bored and has...
book?
Yeah, what's the move in this position he's the least likely to have looked at in detail? And it influences your approach quite a bit, I think. And rook g8 may have been this attempt by MVL to sidestep, you know, the obvious first 3 lines you check if you're white here. I mean, the first one being knight e5, knight g4, of course, and then probably the slow approach with knight e5, bishop e7, knight fd7.
It's a mixed blessing though, because if the position is so sharp, sometimes you can't afford to play the fourth best move.
Absolutely. But it's still something at the back of your mind you listen to. You try and figure out what's the move they may not have looked at in such great detail here.
Yeah. We'll do a little tour and then we're gonna disappear and leave the stage to Fiona to interview people, fill us in what's going on in social media, all the good stuff in the outside digital world. Let's have a look at Topalov Carlsen. What's going on here? The bishop is here.
Yeah, he's stopping the long castle, which is a curious plan. Not something you normally expect, because black takes too tempi to drive the bishop to h5 with the pawn already on g6.
I'm surprised by h4 already. Like, I would have blitzed this move out just to stop any bishop f5s, but Veselin likes to push his pawns.
Yes, and also I think in this particular structure, white is not so heartbroken about the light square bishops coming off, and he felt that, you know, the immediate threat of h4, h5, whilst black is still not quite ready to castle queenside, will create issues for Magnus to deal with.
Issues. Bishop b4, bishop d3, and Magnus, creative stuff. Don't see the bishop much on h5 with a pawn on g6.
Yeah, but white doesn't have a g-pawn, which is very relevant
That's
here, because
very helpful.
Yeah, when g2, g4 is still possible, you don't normally get very many bishops on h5 with this structure. But
I like this for black. I don't see a move at first sight.
Yeah,
bishop e2, but it feels like a cop-out.
Bishop e2 is sad. Yeah, bishop e2 is not what you would like to play. Although you might have to, because f3, f6...
Castle by hand, but it looks incredibly artificial too, and f6 is a threat, maybe.
f6 actually is a threat here, I think. So you could play f3 in order to play f6, knight g4, but it's also f3, queen e7. You're helping black.
Sad move too.
He does play bishop e2.
Yeah, gotta.
And we'll probably take the king, I feel, if black takes on e2. You take with the king, you renew the idea of playing h5. And you hope that your lead in development, such as it is, will compensate for the slight, ungainliness of your structure.
Yep. So complicated but roughly equal.
Yeah, it does feel like it's still somewhat balanced, but
Elyanov, Hari Krishna, we have some more moves. Not many though. Bishop f4, queen f6, queen d2 as expected, knight d7.
yeah, we discussed all this. It's all very natural, and a hugely complicated position, which is, I think, almost impossible to assess correctly without spending some time looking at it, potentially with the help of our Silicon friends.
I'd call it, like 0-41 after bishop c4, but no, seriously, even the computer evaluation doesn't mean that much here, because the king is weak.
Yeah, and also I think, especially in positions like this, you need to prompt the machine or give it a lot of time before you can actually start trusting its evaluation.
So we have 5 interesting games. That's the good news.
Yeah, today I'm extremely happy with the way the round is developing as an observer, because we have very, very exciting positions everywhere.
Fun. We'll be back in a couple of minutes now. Have fun with Fiona. See you guys soon.